Every great lie needs two people. One to tell it, one to believe it, and sometimes, the most dangerous kind, two people who tell it to each other simultaneously, looking straight into each other's eyes, both of them knowing, both of them choosing the lie anyway because the truth on the other side of it is too enormous, too life-altering, too terrifying to step into without warning. That was us. For 2 years, 3 months, and if I'm being precise, which I am now, though I wasn't then, 17 days, my best friend Cole Mercer and I looked at each other and said, just friends. We said it to ourselves in the morning when we woke up thinking about each other. We said it to our other friends when they raised eyebrows at the amount of time we spent together. We said it at 3 in the morning when we were talking on the phone about nothing and everything, and neither of us wanted to hang up. We said it after the moments that were clearly, unmistakably, something more than friendship. The held glance that lasted too long, the accidental touch that neither of us pulled away from, the evenings that stretched toward midnight because neither of us could manufacture a reason to leave. Just friends, said with conviction, said with the practiced ease of a rehearsed line, said with the full knowledge, somewhere beneath the saying of it, that it was the most elaborate and costly fiction either of us had ever constructed. My name is Ryan Ashworth. I am 25 years old, and this is the story of the lie Cole and I told each other, what it cost us, what finally broke it open, and what we found inside it when it finally fell apart. You need to understand what we were before you can understand what we became. Cole and I had met in our junior year of college, in a photography elective neither of us had planned to take. I was an English major who needed an arts credit. He was a pre-med student who had signed up on impulse after walking past the darkroom on his way to the library and smelling the chemical tang of developer fluid and feeling, he told me later, inexplicably pulled toward it. We had been assigned adjacent darkroom stations on the first day of class, and while we waited for our prints to develop in the red-lit silence of the room, we had started talking about something. Neither of us could remember exactly what later, and we had not really stopped talking since. Cole was not the kind of person you expected to be your best friend. He was precise where I was scattered, structured where I was intuitive, the kind of person who kept his apartment organized with a specificity that made my living space look like a weather event. He was quiet in groups, not shy but economical. He had a gift for saying the exact right amount and no more, which meant that, when he did speak, people listened with a sharpness they didn't always bring to the louder voices in the room. He was also, and I am going to state this plainly because the story requires it, one of the most genuinely kind people I had ever met. Not kind in the performative way, not kind as a social strategy. Kind in the structural way, the way that means kindness is how you see people rather than how you treat them, as though every person you encountered was worthy of your full attention and consideration, and the only question was how best to offer it. I had fallen into friendship with him the way you fall into a river when you step too close to the edge, not quite meaning to, slightly shocked by the current, and then too far in to consider getting out. What I had not admitted, for 2 years and 3 months and 17 days, was that friendship was not the whole of what I had fallen into. The accident happened on a Tuesday in February. Cole was 3 years out of medical school by then, doing his residency at a hospital in the city, brutal hours, the specific exhaustion of someone who is learning to save lives while running on insufficient sleep and institutional coffee. I was working as a copywriter at a small agency downtown, which was neither glamorous nor terrible, and left me with reasonable hours and enough mental space to maintain a life outside of work, which Cole's schedule did not always permit. He had been helping a colleague move a piece of medical equipment, one of those favors that seems minor and goes sideways, when a heavy cabinet had shifted and come down on his right hand. 3 fingers broken, ligament damage in the wrist, surgery required, 8 weeks minimum recovery, no use of the dominant hand for most of that period. He called me from the hospital at 9:15 on a Tuesday evening, the particular flatness in his voice of a person who is holding themselves very together by force of will. "I need a favor," he said, "a large one." "Tell me," I said. He explained. His apartment, a small but carefully organized one-bedroom 20 minutes from the hospital, was on the fourth floor of a building without an elevator. His parents were 3 states away and both working. His hospital colleagues were in the middle of the same brutal rotation he'd been part of. He needed someone to help him manage the next several weeks, the daily practicalities of living with a non-functional dominant hand, the medication schedule, the follow-up appointments, the things that a person couldn't do alone when half their capacity was immobilized. "I can stay with you," I said before he had finished asking. "Ryan, I have a laptop. I can work remotely. My lease is month to month anyway." I was already doing the calculation, the way you do when something is clearly the right answer and the only question is logistics. "I'll be there tomorrow morning." A brief silence on the line. "You don't have to." "Cole," I said, "stop." Another silence, then "thank you." I moved into his spare room the next morning with a duffel bag and my work equipment, and what I thought would be a straightforward act of friendship between 2 people who had, over 3 years, become the most important person in each other's daily life. I had no idea, on that Wednesday morning, that I was walking into the 8 weeks that would dismantle the most fundamental lie of my adult life. Living with someone is different from knowing them. This is a truth that sounds obvious but only becomes fully real when you experience it. The way sharing a space with a person reveals the textures of them that geography has previously kept hidden. The way they move through a morning, the sounds of their habits, the coffee routine, the news turned on at a specific volume, the quiet that is not empty but inhabited. The version of a person that exists before the day requires them to perform anything. I had spent significant time in Cole's apartment over 3 years. I knew it well, the shelf of medical textbooks and the separate shelf of novels he read to decompress, the desk where he studied with a focus so complete you could speak his name twice before it landed, the small kitchen where he cooked with the same methodical precision he brought to everything. I knew his apartment. I did not know what it was like to be inside it with him every morning, to wake up 6 feet from where he was sleeping, to be present in the ordinary and unguarded minutes of a life. The first 3 days were logistics. Cole's hand was in a surgical brace from fingertip to mid-forearm, and the things he could not do were numerous and humbling for a person who was accustomed to a high degree of self-sufficiency. Cooking, he could manage simple things one-handed, but not safely or well. Certain buttons and zippers were impossible. Typing was reduced to his left hand, which slowed him to a crawl and frustrated him deeply. Opening containers, carrying bags, managing the pharmacy and the follow-up appointments. These were the practical architecture of the weeks. I handled them. It was not complicated. It was the ordinary work of caring for someone which requires attention and patience and very little else. Cole was a gracious patient, meaning he was not one of those people who perform difficulty in order to receive care, nor one of those who refuse care in order to perform self-sufficiency. He accepted help with the same quiet, direct honesty he brought to everything, acknowledged it, thanked me with genuine simplicity, moved on. What I had not anticipated was the intimacy of it. Not physical intimacy, nothing beyond the ordinary necessities of helping someone manage the limitations of an injury. The intimacy of presence, of existing in the same space through the full spectrum of a day, from the morning when neither of us was performing anything yet, to the evenings when the day had used up whatever careful management we'd applied, and we were just ourselves. Sitting on his couch after dinner with the city audible through the window, talking or not talking, easy in the way that takes years to earn and which we had, without fully acknowledging it, already earned. It was on the 4th evening that I noticed the specific quality of the silence between us. We were on the couch. Cole was reading. He was attempting a novel with his left hand, which worked imperfectly but which he was committed to, and I had my laptop open and was staring at a copy brief I had been staring at for 40 minutes without writing anything. The lamp on the side table made a warm circle of light. Outside, the February city did its February thing. I was not writing the brief. I was aware, with the acute, continuous awareness of a person who has been pretending something for a long time and is finding it harder in close quarters, of exactly where Cole was in the room. The way he turned a page, the careful one-handed navigation of it, the sound of his breathing, the fact that when he laughed at something in the novel, brief and quiet, it did something to me that I had been not examining for 3 years. I looked at my laptop screen. Just friends, I thought, with the particular emphasis of someone arguing with themselves. My laptop screen continued to contain an unwritten brief. By the second week, we had settled into a rhythm. I made coffee in the morning, strong, the way Cole needed it given the hours his body was still running on from residency habit, and left it on the counter before he woke up. He repaid this by insisting on handling the one-handed tasks he'd mastered, which were limited but which he approached with the focused determination of someone who was going to adapt to every constraint placed on him or be very frustrated in the attempt. We made dinner together in the evenings, me doing the technical work, Cole directing from the counter with the authority of someone who knew exactly how things should be done and was mildly pained to be prevented from doing them himself. We talked through those dinners the way we always had, the long, wide-ranging conversations that had been the texture of our friendship from the beginning. About his patients, anonymized and described with the specific combination of medical precision and deep human care that was entirely Cole. About the projects I was working on, the gap between the writing I did for money and the writing I was actually interested in doing. About books, ideas, the news, the city, the specific absurdity of our respective professional worlds. We talked about everything. We talked around the one thing. I became, in those 2 weeks of close proximity, aware of a new dimension of the lie I'd been telling myself. It was one thing to sustain a fiction across the ordinary distance of separate apartments and scheduled hangs, and the natural breathing room of independent lives. It was another thing entirely to sustain it across a one-bedroom apartment at 7 in the morning, when Cole was trying to button his shirt with one hand, and the other was immobilized, and he turned to me without self-consciousness and said, "Can you?" And I crossed the kitchen and did the buttons, and we were standing 4 inches apart in the morning quiet, and neither of us moved away for the extra half-second it would have taken to make the moment unambiguous. Half a second. Such a small unit of time, such an enormous amount of information contained in it. I went to my laptop and worked on a brief. Cole went to his desk and studied. The morning continued its morning business around us, unhelpful and indifferent. His friend from residency, a woman named Priya who was direct and funny and had known Cole since their first year of medical school, came over on a Wednesday of the second week, bringing food and the warm, irreverent affection of someone who had earned the right to say anything. She and I had met several times over the years at various gatherings and got along well in the breezy, easy way of two people who share an important person. She stayed for dinner. We ate at the small kitchen table and Priya and Cole talked about the hospital and I listened and contributed and it was genuinely pleasant. As she was leaving, she hugged Cole carefully, aware of the arm, and then turned to me in the doorway. "You're a good person," she said to me, with the directness of someone who means exactly what they say. "Taking care of him." "He'd do the same," I said. "He would," she agreed. She looked at me for a moment, the look of a perceptive person doing a quick and accurate calculation. "You doing okay? It's a lot." "I'm fine," I said, automatic. She held my gaze for a half-second longer than necessary. Then she said, in the noncommittal tone of someone who has a different assessment and is choosing not to share it yet, and left. I stood in the closed doorway for a moment. Then I went back to the living room, where Cole was on the couch with his novel, and I sat in the chair across from him, and we spent the evening in comfortable silence, and I told myself, with diminishing conviction, just friends. The storm came on a Friday. February in our city was capable of a specific kind of weather event. Not quite snow, not quite rain, the freezing kind that coated everything in a thin, treacherous layer of ice and made the city sound muffled and strange. It had been building since the afternoon, and by 9 in the evening, the world outside Cole's fourth-floor window was a gray-white blur, and the sound of the wind in the gaps of the old building was a low, continuous note. Neither of us had anywhere to go. Cole had no appointments that weekend, and I had finished my week's work by noon. We had cooked dinner together, pasta, the dish we'd arrived at as the most practical given the one-handed constraints, and cleaned up. And now we were in the living room with the particular kind of Friday evening energy that has no agenda and no end time. Cole had put music on, not background music, actual music, a playlist he'd made of things he'd been wanting to listen to properly. The kind of music that asks to be listened to rather than heard. We sat with it for a while, and I watched the ice on the window accumulate in thin lines, and something about the sealed-in quality of the evening, the storm outside, the warmth inside, the music, made the ordinary management of pretending feel more effortful than usual. "Can I ask you something?" Cole said. He was on the couch with his braced arm on a pillow, which was the position the physical therapist had specified for evenings. The lamp was on. He was looking at the middle distance with the expression he wore when something had been sitting in the back of his mind for a while. "Sure," I said. "Why did you come when I called?" I looked at him. "Because you needed help." "I know," he said, "but you moved in. You reorganized your whole life for 8 weeks. That's beyond what most people would do, even close friends." I held his gaze. "You'd have done the same." "I would," he said, "but I'd have known why I was doing it." Something in the room shifted. The music continued, quiet and particular. The ice on the window made its thin lines. "What do you mean?" I said. "I mean," he stopped. He was choosing words with his usual care, but there was something in the choosing of them that was more deliberate than usual, the choosing of someone navigating territory they have been avoiding. "I mean that you dropped everything to be here, and you've been here for 3 weeks, and you take care of everything with this ease, like it's the most natural thing in the world, like there's nowhere else you'd rather be. And I'm trying to understand what that means." "It means I care about you," I said carefully. "Ryan," he said. The way he said my name. Not a question, not a rebuke. Something more precise, the sound of a person setting something down. The way you set something down when you've been carrying it for a while and have decided, finally, that your arms are too tired. "What?" I said. He looked at me. "You know what?" The storm pressed against the window. The music moved through the room, unhurried. "Cole, I'm not asking you to say anything," he said. I just need to know if I'm seeing what I think I'm seeing. Because I've been asking myself that question for a long time, and I keep arriving at the same answer. And then I tell myself I'm wrong. And then something happens, like tonight, like you just sitting here, like the most important thing you could be doing is being in this room with me while it storms outside. And I think," he stopped. "You think what?" I said. He met my eyes directly. "I think we've both been lying," he said. The sentence landed in the room with the weight of something that has been true for a long time and has finally been said aloud. I did not speak for a moment. "Cole," I said finally, and my voice came out rougher than I intended. "Tell me I'm wrong," he said, not a demand, almost an offering a way out if I needed one. "Tell me I'm wrong and I will believe you, and we will never speak of this and nothing will change." I looked at him, at the face I had looked at for 3 years across tables and couches and dark rooms lit only by developing prints, the face that had become in that time the clearest and most familiar landscape I knew. At the careful, direct honesty of him, the quality I had loved longest and feared most, because it had always been only a matter of time before that honesty turned itself on the one thing we'd both agreed not to examine. "I can't tell you you're wrong," I said. The room was very still. "Okay," Cole said softly. "I don't know what to do with that," I said. I've been managing this for a long time and I stopped. "I'm scared." "I know," he said, "me too." I looked at him. "You." Something shifted in his face, the final layer of the composed exterior, the last piece of the careful management giving way. "Ryan," he said, with a kind of quiet exhaustion that was also, underneath it, a relief. "Why do you think I've been asking myself if I'm seeing what I think I'm seeing? Why do you think I keep arriving at the same answer and then telling myself I'm wrong?" "Because," I stopped. "Because it's terrifying," he said simply. "Because you're my best friend and this is the most important thing in my life, and the thought of getting this wrong is, the thought of losing it is," he shook his head slightly. "I've been as scared as you have. I've just been scared of different parts of it." The music played. The storm moved against the glass. "What parts?" I said. "I've been scared that it was one-sided," he said. "That I was reading something into a friendship because I wanted it to be there. That I would say something and you'd look at me differently and the whole 3 years would be," he paused, "ruined. And what I've been scared of," I said slowly, "is saying it out loud and making it real. Because once it's real it can hurt you. Once it's real you can lose it." He looked at me. "We've been scared of opposite things," he said. "And both things kept us in the lie," I said. He nodded once. "Both things kept us in the lie." Outside, the storm did what storms do, indifferent to the human reckoning happening on the other side of the glass, continuing its work of coating everything in ice and changing the texture of the world. Inside, two people sat in a lamplit room and looked at each other with the particular clarity that arrives when a long pretense has been named and the air has gone out of it. "What do we do?" I said. "I don't know," he said honestly. I think we're both new at this part, the part after the lie." "Yeah," I said. We sat with that for a while. The music cycled to something quieter. The storm began, imperceptibly, to ease. We did not resolve anything that night. This is important to say, because the story of two people acknowledging a truth they've been hiding is not the same as the story of two people knowing what to do with it. The acknowledgement was not the end. In some ways, it was a more complicated beginning, the beginning of the actual thing, with all of its real weight and uncertainty, rather than the managed, contained version we'd been living in. What changed was the pretending. We stopped pretending. Not dramatically, not in a single gesture or declaration. But the next morning, when Cole and I were in the kitchen, and he was watching me make coffee, and neither of us was performing the comfortable fiction of just friends, there was a difference in the air, a directness, a presence, the specific quality of two people who are now in the same room with all of themselves, rather than the portions they'd agreed to show. We talked about it. Not immediately, not all at once. Cole was not someone who processed things quickly and externally, and I was still learning to be someone who processed things honestly rather than managed them away. But over the next few days, in the ordinary fabric of the apartment and the evenings and the long conversations that had always been the best part of knowing him, we talked. He told me about the first time he'd recognized what he was feeling. Second year of residency, 18 months before, he had been describing me to a colleague in the way you describe the important people in your life, and the colleague had said, with the bluntness of someone who has been awake for 20 hours and has no filter left, "You talk about him like he's your person." Cole had gone back to his apartment that night and sat with that sentence for a long time, and what he had found in the sitting was not surprise, but recognition. The quiet recognition of something that had been true for a while and had only now been given words. He had not told me. He had instead done what I had done, found a way to keep it contained, to function within the friendship without letting the friendship know what else it was carrying. I told him about my version, less a single moment than a slow accumulation, the way the evidence had built over months and years while I filed it away systematically. The way I had been aware, without admitting I was aware, of the small habitual attentions of him. The texts when something happened that he thought I'd want to know about. The way he remembered specific things I'd mentioned and brought them back months later. The way conversations with him used more of my actual brain than conversations with almost anyone else. The way the apartment had felt from the first morning, like the place I was most entirely myself. 3 years, he said when I'd finished. 3 years, I confirmed. We wasted a lot of time, he said. We weren't ready, I said. Both of us were scared. The time wasn't wasted, it was us getting here. He looked at me. That's very generous. I'm practicing, I said, which made him laugh, the real laugh, the quiet one that was entirely unperformed. Priya came by again at the end of that week. She took one look at the quality of the air in the apartment and turned to me with the expression of someone whose calculation had been confirmed. Something happened, she said. We talked, Cole said. About? Yes, he said. She looked between us for a moment. Then she sat down at the kitchen table with the air of someone settling in for something she had been anticipating for a while. Finally, she said, I've been watching this for a year. Do you know how much self-restraint it has taken me not to say anything? You've been watching what? I said. She gave me a look of gentle exasperation. Ryan, the way he talks about you, the way you showed up here with a duffel bag and reorganized your life without blinking. I'm a doctor. I observe things. She waved a hand. What are you going to do about it? We're figuring that out, Cole said. Figure it out faster, she said. Life is short. I work in a hospital. I have data on this. Here is what I did not expect about the weeks after the storm. That telling the truth would not make everything easier. That it would make some things, temporarily, harder. We had named the thing between us. We had stopped pretending it was only friendship. But naming something and knowing what to do with it are different skills, and we were both, in different ways, learning them from scratch. Cole had been out for 2 years. He had come to terms with his own identity in the quiet, internal way he did most things, without drama, without announcement, with the simple honesty of a person who believes being true to yourself is less a choice than an obligation. His family knew. A small number of his friends did. He had not been in a serious relationship since coming out, which he attributed partly to the hours of residency, and partly to the fact that the person he was most interested in being around was someone he decided, for complicated reasons, he couldn't be honest with. I was newer to all of it. The self-knowledge I had been sitting on for 3 years had been, until the last several months, something I classified as the thing I was not examining, a category that had its own internal logic and which I had navigated with considerable ingenuity. I was 25 years old and I had not yet told anyone except, now, Cole, which meant that the simultaneous process of understanding myself and being honest with the most important person in my life was happening in the same window, at the same time, with no buffer. This was a lot. I went to see my friend Marcus, a college friend who had come out at 20 and who I had stayed close with through the years and who was, I knew, someone I could tell things to without them becoming complicated. I drove to his apartment one evening in the 3rd week of my stay at Cole's and sat at his kitchen table and told him, simply and without preparation, I'm gay. I think I have been for a long time. Marcus had looked at me for a moment with the expression of a person reorganizing a mental file. Okay, he said, tell me what's going on. I told him. Cole, the accident, the apartment, the storm, the conversation. He listened with the full, patient attention of a good friend who understands that the most useful thing he can do is let you finish. When I was done, he said, how are you doing? Not the Cole part, the you part. Terrified, I said, but lighter than I've been in years. That tracks, he said. Terrified is normal. Lighter means you're going in the right direction. He paused. Are you going to tell your family? Eventually, I said, one step at a time. He nodded. That's the right answer. He looked at me steadily. You know this is going to be okay, all of it, you know that. I'm practicing knowing it, I said. He reached across the table and squeezed my arm once briefly. Good, keep practicing. I drove back to Cole's apartment through the winter city, the streets still bearing traces of ice at the edges, the sky the deep clear black of a cold February night. I thought about what lighter meant, the specific quality of it, the way carrying a truth on the outside of you instead of the inside changed the weight of the ordinary day. I thought about what it had cost me to sit with it for so long, and what I was beginning to understand it would give back. I let myself into the apartment. Cole was at his desk with a medical journal, reading one-handed, the focused attention that was entirely characteristic. He looked up when I came in. How was Marcus? He said. Good, I said. Really good, actually. I sat on the couch and pulled off my jacket. I told him. Cole turned in his chair to face me properly. Yeah. Everything, I said. About me, about this. I gestured between us. It felt right. He held my gaze with the expression I had come to think of as his most honest one. The one that had no layer of professional composure or personal management. Just the direct, clear attention of a person seeing another person. I'm glad, he said simply. Me too, I said. We stayed up too late that night talking. About what came next and how we got there. About the patience required to build something carefully instead of rushing it because you'd been waiting and the waiting was over. About what we both needed to feel safe. Cole's need for the security of knowing I was in this with the same steadiness he brought to everything. And my need for the room to figure out my own identity without the pressure of having everything resolved immediately. About the fact that some things needed to be allowed to develop at their own pace, in their own time, without being rushed into a shape. We have time, Cole said. We do, I agreed. But I want you to know something. He looked at me steadily. This isn't me being patient because I'm uncertain. I'm certain. I have been for a while. I'm being patient because you need the time, and anything you need I will give you, and the waiting is fine because you're worth waiting for. I looked at him. The lamp, the ice still at the edges of the window, the apartment that had in 3 weeks become the most real place in my life. Cole, I said. Yeah. I don't want you to wait, I said. I'm scared and I'm figuring things out and I'm new at this, but I don't want you to wait like there's something unresolved. There isn't, I breathed. I know what I feel. I've known for a long time. I'm just learning to live in it out loud. He was quiet for a moment. Okay, he said, then softer, okay. Weeks 4 and 5 and 6 were the weeks I stopped lying to myself. Not the Cole lie that one had been named in the storm. The other lies. The ones I told about who I was, what I wanted, what I had been afraid of. I started having the conversations I'd been deferring, with Marcus more thoroughly. With my friend Jade, who I'd known since high school and who, when I told her, burst into tears and said I always hoped you'd get here in a way that told me she had suspected for years and had been sitting on it out of respect for my timing. With my sister, Emma, who was 23 and had a directness that had always intimidated me and who said, simply and without drama, I love you, this changes nothing. Now tell me about Cole because you've been talking about him for 3 years and I have some follow-up questions. I did not talk to my parents yet. That was a conversation for another window, one I was building toward but not yet standing in front of. Dr. Ree, I had started seeing a therapist in week 4, a practical and unsentimental man who had the manner of someone who found human beings genuinely interesting rather than exhaustingly complicated. Helped me understand that the timing of different conversations was mine to set, that there was no deadline, that the only measure of when was whether I was doing it for myself or to get it done. What's the difference? I had asked. One is love, he said. The other is housekeeping. I thought about that a lot. Cole and I existed, through those weeks, in the space between what we'd acknowledged and what we were still becoming. It was not awkward. Awkward implies a mismatch. And there was no mismatch, just the careful and intentional building of something by two people who both understood that the most important things are built slowly. We were more honest with each other than we had been before, which meant we were more fully present, which meant the ordinary evenings, dinner, the couch, the music, the conversations, were richer than they'd been even at their previous best. He started teaching me chess, which he played well and I played with chaotic enthusiasm and no particular skill, and we spent several evenings at the kitchen table with the board between us and the specific pleasure of two people, with very different approaches to the same problem working through the difference. I won occasionally, through moves that Cole characterized as objectively incorrect but accidentally effective, which I took as a compliment. "You play like someone who doesn't believe in losing," he said one evening. "I believe in it," I said. "I just prefer not to." "That's different from being good at chess." "It's given me 3 wins." Against me, who was managing a hand injury. A win is a win. He laughed the real laugh, and I felt it the way I always felt it, the warm, precise thing it did in my chest, and this time I didn't manage it or contain it. I just let it be what it was. This, I thought, this is what I've been protecting myself from, this specific warmth, the one that was always worth the fear. Cole's final surgical follow-up was on a Thursday morning in early April. 8 weeks and 3 days after the accident, the orthopedic surgeon examined the hand, reviewed the imaging, declared the healing proceeding well, outlined the physical therapy he would continue for the next 6 weeks, and cleared him to resume limited use of the hand with increasing capacity over the coming month. We walked out of the clinic into an April morning that had decided to be spring. Properly, finally, the air warm and the light clear, and the trees along the clinic's block beginning to do the hesitant, tentative thing that trees do in early April when they're not quite sure yet but are leaning toward it. "That's it then," Cole said, standing on the sidewalk with his hand unbandaged now, still braced but lighter at his side. "That's it," I said. "You can go home," he said. His tone was neutral, the tone he used when he was keeping something internal. "You've been here 8 weeks. You can go back to your apartment." "I know," I said. We stood on the spring sidewalk. "Do you want to?" he asked. I looked at him, at the person who had, 8 weeks ago, called me from a hospital room with the flat voice of someone managing a hard situation and said I need a favor, who had thanked me for a duffel bag and a laptop and 8 weeks of proximity with the simple, genuine gratitude of someone who does not take things for granted, who had told me, during a storm on a February night, that we had both been lying. "No," I said. "No, you don't want to go back," he said, the precision that was entirely him. "No, I don't want to go back," I confirmed. He looked at me for a moment. The April light did something to his face, made it warmer, more open, the composed exterior entirely absent. Just Cole in the spring morning looking at me. "Then don't," he said simply. "My apartment." "Your apartment will be there," he said. "It'll keep." A pause, stay. One word, offered with the characteristic economy of a man who says exactly what he means and no more. I thought about 8 weeks of mornings, coffee on the counter, buttons in the kitchen, chess on the kitchen table, the storm and the lamp and the music and the night everything we'd been pretending dissolved. The conversations, the honesty, the specific accumulated weight of knowing someone in full and being known in return. "Okay," I said. He reached over with the healing hand, carefully, deliberately, and found my hand, and held it. There on the sidewalk in the April morning, with the trees making their tentative spring decisions and the city doing what cities do around people who are busy with something more important. I held on. "We wasted 3 years," I said, because I needed to say it even now. We needed 3 years, he said, because he was Cole and he always arrived at the more accurate version. We needed every conversation and every evening and every piece of the lie before we could be done with it. He looked at me. The time wasn't wasted. It was us getting here. He was using my words back at me. I had said that to him weeks ago in the apartment. You remembered that, I said. I remember everything you say, he said, with the directness that had always been his most disarming quality. I have been for 3 years. I looked at him, the clear April light, the healing hand in mine. Cole, I said. Yeah. I'm not scared anymore, I said. Or I'm scared of some things, but not of this, not of you, I breathed. Not of who I am. He looked at me with the expression I had been learning over 8 weeks to read as his most honest one. Not the professional composure, not the careful management. Just him, entirely present, entirely there. Good, he said. We walked back to the apartment. His apartment, which was also, now, in some way that mattered, mine not by lease or by claim, but by the slower and more permanent process of two people becoming home to each other. It is July now. Cole's hand is mostly recovered. He returned to full surgical duties 3 weeks ago, which he described as returning to himself, because medicine was not what he did but who he was. He worked long hours and came home and made dinner with both hands and the specific satisfaction of a person who has had a capability restored and is not going to take it for granted. I went back to my apartment eventually, for practical reasons, not emotional ones. We were figuring out the shape of things, the architecture of a life being newly designed, and rushing that process for the sake of a gesture seemed like the wrong kind of impatience. I came and went. He came and went. The 20 minutes between our apartments was not distance so much as the breathing room of two people who understood, from long experience, the value of building things properly. I told my parents in June. A Sunday phone call to my mother first. She was the right first, the one who would absorb it and help my father find his footing. And she had been quiet for a moment and then said, I want you to know I love you, and I want to understand this better. Will you help me understand? And I had said yes, and we had talked for an hour, and it had been imperfect and loving and real, which was the best available outcome and the one I had begun, with Dr. Ree's help, to recognize as enough. My father called 3 days later. He was a man of few and deliberate words, my father, and he said, Your mother told me. I've been thinking about what to say. A pause. I love you. That's first. I have things to learn and I'm going to learn them. And I want to meet Cole because from what you've described he sounds like someone worth knowing. Someone worth knowing. I told Cole that evening. He had looked up from his desk with the expression that was not the laugh but the precursor to it, the thing that happened in his eyes before the sound arrived. Your father sounds precise, he said. He is, I said. You'll get along. He did, they did, but that's a different story. This one is about the lie, about the 2 years and 3 months and 17 days of just friends, said in the face of all evidence to the contrary, about the storm that broke it open and the honest, careful weeks of building something real in the space where the lie had been, about the April morning and one word stay, and a hand held on a sidewalk in the clear beginning of spring. I want to say something true, for anyone who is in the middle of their own version of this lie. The lie is not comfortable. I know it feels like it is. I know the management of it, the daily maintenance, the practiced ease of saying just friends until the saying of it becomes its own kind of habit. I know the specific logic of it, that the lie is safe, that the truth is risk, that what you have inside the lie is real and what the truth might do to it is uncertain. But the lie has a cost. It costs you the full version of every moment, the complete experience of being in a room with someone you love, of knowing and being known, of existing in your own life as your entire self rather than the carefully edited version. The lie is not protection. It is a tax you pay daily on your own joy. The truth is terrifying. This is also real, and I do not want to minimize it. The truth required me to look at myself honestly for the first time in years. It required me to say hard things to the people I loved. It required me to sit in uncertainty and discomfort and the specific vulnerability of being seen without armor. But on the other side of the terrifying truth is the thing that the lie was trying to protect: the relationship, the love, the life, except actually yours now. Actual and full and real, with nothing hidden and nothing managed, and all the weight of the secret finally off the chest that was carrying it. Cole and I are not a perfect story. We are two imperfect people who told each other the same lie for too long and then, on a February night during a storm, told each other the truth instead. The truth was better. The truth is always better.